All right, Rylan, let's take a look at your essay. So you started off with a question, which is pretty good. The only thing I want to give you an air of caution is your question without media, what would the world be like? Unfortunately, we already have the answer to this, and it depends on how you define media. So we do have written form that comes early in history. So when we talk about media in the sense of what this is, we're talking about a much broader global kind of sensation. Because if you think about it, technically in Salem, Massachusetts, during the witch trials, we don't necessarily have media. Media is more of this kind of more modern form that's got newspapers and magazines and TV, radio, whatever it would be. So, the question is okay. The problem is we already have the answer to this a little bit. And we see that through history. We know what that's like. So it's not the strongest question. It's not the greatest hook. So moving on from that, you also slip into second person, which doesn't quite work into here. You would not be able to hear things as fast because you could just straight out say, without media, the world would not get such mass communication in a quick amount of time. And then you go right into saying what you're going to talk about in the paper, which you don't want to do. You want to build up what mass hysteria is, what this world would look like, and you want to take time to explain that and integrate all of this into your analysis. So if we pull up Microsoft Word here, if you say media is more potent in developing mass hysteria because of social media and its I'm not sure what your second point was. Oh, and its ability to reach a large a large audience in, wow, this is terrible, in a quick time. There we go. My typing's better. Media is more potent in developing mass hysteria because of social media and its ability to reach a large audience in a quick time. That is more effective thesis than what you have going on right here. And then aside from your contractions, which you should not be using contractions, you need to spell them out. Do not even address the opposition once your thesis is already there. You don't need to. So you need to retweak your thesis a little bit to make it more clear with what it is. Because originally, to me, this just read as extending of how media works, not necessarily your thesis or your claim that you're taking in the essay. And you need to improve the hook a little bit. And I also have this spacing issue here. So make sure you are double checking that. So moving on. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, this right here without media, there would be no way for so many people to know about something. I'm going to push back a little bit on that because we still have ways to communicate without media. It's just it's not as quick. So think about that a little bit. So when we move on, what I'm noticing is the way you define mass hysteria. Is it here or your second paragraph? Let me find it real quick. Yep, right here you say, so without those two things, we wouldn't, that's contraction, be able to have mass hysteria. So the thing is, if you are going to challenge the definition of mass hysteria, you need to be a little bit more explicit with what you mean by it, because the problem is mass hysteria is not a global phenomenon. It does not have to be global. If we think about some kind of plague, for example, if we randomly broke out into a plague based on your definition, this is what I'm getting. If the plague affected only people in Michigan, then we don't have a mass plague because it's only affecting one region instead of everywhere else. So even if you look at Salem and the witch trials, sure, this is just in Salem, and only 20-ish people were executed, but everyone knew about it. A lot of people played a role in this small village. So we do typically have mass hysteria because it affects the masses in a particular region. It's the same thing as if we had all sophomores, like half of the sophomores break out, even if half of you sophomores were accused of witchcraft, because that's just what I'm on right now, is if half of you were accused on witchcraft, sure, it's not mass hysteria for Coldwater, but it's mass hysteria for the sophomores at Coldwater. So that's just something to consider, because you're kind of tweaking the definition of mass hysteria without even having addressed what it means to have mass hysteria. So if you want to challenge that perspective, that's fine, but you need to make sure that you are putting that in your paper, because right now, this kind of sentence doesn't work because we do have mass hysteria. I want you to know that. But without media, there would be no way for so many people to know about something, like I said. Maybe not as quick, but we could talk about that. And they say, if media did not influence mass hysteria, then how would people find out about things that are happening? Kind of redundant, kind of repeats itself. So think about that a little bit. Another thing is, the main way people find out about the major thing or things that blow up is the news or social media. So here we go. We have a lot of different things here. So this is fine that you're saying the news or social media prompts it for people to say. That's actually a better topic sentence. But I'm going to tell you right now, I am hating the word thing in your paper. Another thing, this thing, thing. Find another word, because this is very, very repetitive at this point. Contraction there, and then you have an example here. So you really only have one example. You have all of this that is, we find out about this thing because it is through media, which is fine, but then you have one example, and then you have one piece of analysis. So this is my, how do I word this? I guess my challenge to you is you would have to go back through your essay and look at this kind of paragraph and think about the definition of mass hysteria, because it's not correct in the essay. And you really need to focus on the analysis and specific examples in this right there. Okay. So moving on to your next body paragraph. So if we have, you have this introductory clause next, you need to use a comma, and I think you had it somewhere in your intro as well. Yeah, when you have the word next, you have to use a comma there. So we have this comma concern, and now we have this different definition of mass hysteria as being a mass influence. And when you talk about in my feelings, I don't think this is necessarily hysteria, because if we look at, when I was looking up how to define media for years, if we look at the hysteria, oh, hold on, that's my Siri going. Hysteria is an exaggerated or uncontrolled emotion or excitement, especially among a group of people. So I guess it can work. We're more looking at the psychiatric perspective of it, but I don't know if it's the best way to use this example here. But you are right. So this is an example of media causing things to go viral. So maybe you want to talk about that instead, about how it causes things to go viral. Let's see. The problem is, oh, I didn't mention this earlier. Apps, you need, I know we talked about apps, but it does stand for application, so you need to make sure that you have that spelled out completely the first time. And what I'm noticing here is you have these articles, but the only thing you mentioned from it is the Charlie challenge. The Drake in My Feelings challenge was not mentioned in the article. So far I'm not seeing a whole lot of textual evidence or analysis that you are using. And then, for example, you need a comma there as well. All right, so when we move into here, trying to think how to word this. So you still have the contractions that you need to get rid of, and an opposing side may think it is more human nature than media that influences mass hysteria. Pretty good topic sentence here. But this is where it's hypothetical. Maybe they think it this way because of this, because they don't use media. You can't say hypotheticals of, well, they probably think of it this way because of this, unless you're using textual evidence for it. And then you go in to talk about rumors and how they can spread fast, and Salem doesn't have media, which is correct. But you don't do anything to refute it. You just say they don't use media, so they don't see this perspective, and I don't think that's really a way to refute it. But as we end your essay, media is more potent to mass hysteria than human nature. Don't start a sentence with because. You don't want to do that, so you have some conjunction concerns in here. You don't really want to start sentences with conjunctions unless you have the proper commas, and because is one of your subordinating conjunctions, and there's no comma to link this to a different independent clause. Just straight out say, without media, there would be no way for so many people to know something. Next, and you're missing the comma there, a lot of people spend time, blah, blah, blah. Opposition thinks this. Not having media is like not having life at all. So, in a strictly unbiased way, parts of your paper do not work because now you're implying that all these people who have lived before you did not have a life. So you have a little bit of a misinterpretation of what mass hysteria is and what having media is like. And this is fine if you want to say it's not like having a life at all, but you just discredited literally the lives of a lot of historical figures and whatever it may be. So be cognizant of that. But overall, the essay, I think you've got some bones structure, like if you've got like bones of a paper, but it's not cohesive yet because you're just not using textual evidence. You have this quick thing. Lastly, in the Crucible, here's this, but you don't even introduce the author, and the first time you do it, you need to. And then you have this, so you literally have 2 whole sentences in this entire paper that reference the text and articles, which is what you were supposed to do. The prior knowledge is fine, but you need to be cognizant of that. So overall, Rylan, if you do the rewrite, be cognizant of how you're using the text in here, and be cognizant of your time, because I don't know if you know this about Google Docs, but I can see through this document the days you worked on it, and it was not a whole lot of in-class time that you had put some effort into this. So be cognizant of this. You can do a rewrite. The main thing is you're going to need that textual evidence because that's kind of what is lacking right now.